For a bit of background information, this was around the time when my uncle was around. I won't say his name for privacy reasons, but for to protect his privacy, we'll call him by the name Stephen. Stephen was my uncle from my mom's side, but of course, not really from my mom's side, but you get what I mean. His name, he is really not too important, but I'll get to the point. Stephen then had 2 kids, and of course he was living with his wife. At the time, this was around the time when they were in PEI. While in PEI, Steve had been pretty much just exploring, having a good time with his family. However, though, something really strange happened. Steve was looking over when he realized that there was a laptop. The laptop looked like it had been used for school, but it didn't look like there was any water damage or anything done to it. Of course, he was hiking with his wife in the forest, so they ended up picking up the laptop. Once they did, they decided to take it back to their house. Once they took it back to their house, they opened up the laptop to realize that there was no PIN code in, so they happened to have gotten in the laptop and to find out whose laptop it was. Apparently, it belonged to a girl named Maria. Now, of course, there was no phone number, so there wasn't any way to contact her to say to her the laptop was found. Steven decided to look through the laptop and look through some files. Most of the files were pretty much just some pictures of her family and stuff. But what really was freaky was the fact that there was some already written messages in a message board. Of course, I think it was Facebook, but I don't really remember. Steve clicked on it and realized he was on her profile. It was a guy that she's never known. Of course, it was a guy from Michigan, but he looked Pakistani more than American. He looked over and did looking more and got into more depth of it to realize that this guy was her ex-boyfriend. And it turned out that he had plans to murder Maria for rejecting him. Steve took the laptop and went to the authorities, and of course, they never updated him about the laptop. Steve isn't sure if Maria is alive or okay, but he really does hope that she's alive and well. If anything happened to her, then he really does hope that she finds her peace. A friend of mine, which I will call her by the name Rachel, was in high school when this happened to her. Now, Rachel used to be a mediator for me at the time of the story, so this was around the time when she used to live in her house. Now, Rachel was about 17 years old when this happened to her. She came home from school since both of her parents had errands to do, and neither of them would be back till late at night. So Rachel was pretty much alone. Her older brother was in college at the time, so she was pretty much alone. Rachel got on Xbox 360 and started playing some Halo just to pass the time. As she was gaming, she decided to go and order herself a pizza. She went up to order a pizza, and while she waited for her pizza to be there, she was working on some homework that she had to get done. While she was working on her homework, she ended up looking at her front door of the door to realize that there was a strange car parked on her driveway. At first, she thought that it could have been her parents, so she went up to see if it was her parents. It turns out it wasn't really her parents at all. She ended up looking and realizing that it wasn't her parents. The car didn't even look like their parents at all. In fact, it was just really strange. Of course, Rachel wasn't really sure about that. She had a feeling that it could have been someone suspicious, but she wasn't really too sure. But however, though, she decided to get her cordless phone and go upstairs and be ready to call 911 if this person were to try to break in. At first, what appeared to be a man who just came out of the front driver's seat, and he ended up walking up and looking around the property. This really made Rachel nervous, knowing that whoever this is definitely a burglar, and he was having plans on trying to get in. He ends up looking around again, but then he goes and starts pounding on the front door. That noise really made Rachel really scared, so she called 911 and told them pretty much that someone was trying to break in her house. The 911 operator told her to stay in on the line, but to stay in where she is and wait until the officers get there. Of course, she had to wait a while and was afraid that something could have potentially happened. She stayed there for a little while, and of course she was scared, thinking that whoever it was probably got in. It took a little bit of a while, but eventually she didn't hear anyone or anything in the house. Now, at first she wasn't so sure if she should go down there and see if the burglar was still there, but she decided against it, thinking that if somebody was still in the house, then she would be putting herself in further more danger. Of course, this is when she decided to break the bullet and grabbed a knife that was a hunting knife she had. When she grabbed her hunting knife, she went outside. Not really outside, but outside of her bedroom. She ended up looking to see that there was a man who had what seemed to be an axe. He had his back turned to her, so of course she had her weapon ready in case if he were trying to break in. It wasn't long until the sirens showed up, and of course the man was arrested. What was really strange was that he didn't try to fight back or even resist arrest, to which was really strange, but of course that was just that. Rachel wasn't even sure what to describe it, but after the cops put the man in handcuffs, both her parents were called. When her parents were called, that was when she end up telling her parents all about who broke into the house. Of course, it turns out that this guy was planning on stealing some of valuables like jewelry and stuff. However, since the man was taken away, he wasn't going to hurt anybody anymore. Rachel still had a bit of paranoia, knowing that she almost could have been kidnapped or something. But, in the other hand, she also could have been robbed or something much worse. She still isn't sure today what she should do or not, but every time she gets into the idea of sleep paralysis, of pretty much break-ins, she's very paranoid and was just afraid that this man may come back for her. Since then, they had nothing like that ever happen, and Rachel has 2 kids now. She still gets paranoid here and there, and of course she still thinks that man may one day come back for her. Of course, that man hadn't even tried to attempt to break out of prison. But what's really scary is that anything like this could happen to anyone. It still terrifies her to this day, and she still even wonders what could have happened to her if she didn't call 911. God only knows what could have really happened to her that night if she didn't pick up the phone and dial 911. It still really frightens her to this day. She had a bit of PTSD since that day, but eventually it subsided. She still thinks about this every now and then, but it's not really as often as it used to be. Of course, she's still happy now, but she will never forget this moment where she could have died, or something much worse. Before I begin with this story, this is just to let you know that this isn't really the type of story to make you jump out of your seat, but it's definitely one that is quite questionable, but also pretty strange. This happened back in 2021 when I was pretty much 23 years old. I think this was around maybe in the spring, but I can't really remember if it was in April or May. I'll just say spring because that was when the time this event happened. In springtime, time was pretty much one of my favorite seasons. But of course, this was one that I really was not only just shocked, but really questionable. I woke up one night from a bad dream, or something like that. I can't even remember what dream I was having. I couldn't open my eyes and I couldn't move my body. It was just in a state of that I was frozen. I couldn't see anything because my room was dark and my eyes were closed. But I thought I could hear and sense a feeling that someone was in the room watching me. I know it sounds really strange, but I couldn't open my eyes to see if someone was really there or not. I stood there frozen, unsure of what I should do or say. I was just in shock. What really shocks me was that I couldn't see if anyone was in the room, but I felt a cold, sudden feeling that someone was in the room. I didn't eventually snapped out of my trance to wake up, but there was nobody there. Honestly, it was shocking since my brother and my mom were asleep. But I think what I had experienced that night was sleep paralysis. I don't even know if that's actually happened to anyone where your eyes are closed but you have sleep paralysis at the same time or not. But this is definitely a strange occurrence that I have ever had. I think it's just really strange, but at the same time, I'm not really sure what to believe. So this happened to one of my friends who was in high school at the time, and we'll call her by the name Nicole. Nicole was about maybe 18 at the time of the story, and she had a very shocking experience. Since Nicole was 18, she was home from college for the spring break, to which it was really nice for her to get a break off. When she arrived at her parents' house, her parents welcomed her back home for the spring break. Of course, she had a younger sister who was 16, but she had gone off at a friend's birthday party, which turned out to be a sleepover. Of course, since at the time Nicole was living in Florida when they were having a really bad rainstorm. Her mother was working at the hours as a waitress, while her father had to go out due to a possible storm emergency. So Nicole was alone in her house, and she was pretty much just FaceTiming one of her friends when she all of a sudden saw a knock at the door. Really strange. She ended up going over to the door to see if someone was there. She looked to see that there was nobody at the door, to which was strange since she heard it from the front door. She went upstairs to her bedroom thinking maybe she's just hearing things. While she was in her bedroom, she ended up looking outside to see that there was someone in her yard. She couldn't really see if it was a man or a woman, but it definitely was someone very unsettling. He was pretty much just looking at the yard and didn't pay attention to anything Nicole was where she was. Nicole ended up dialing 911 and explained it to the cops, but just as soon as she looked up, the man was gone. The police were on their way too, so that was when Nicole got off with the officer and ended up calling her dad and her mom about it. Of course, they were shocked to see that Nicole had called, but of course, they assumed it was bad news. When Nicole explained that there was someone at the yard, her dad told her to lock the door and make sure not to let anyone in until the cops arrived. When the cops arrived, they took her statement, but that man had never returned since. Nicole wasn't so sure if what his intentions were, but she honestly could tell that they were not good. She's never saw him again since then, and she hopes it stays that way.